All right, guys, sorry, getting everyone's attention here. We got everybody here but one. It's 5 after, so I guess if my phone rings, it's probably that person, so we'll let them in, but otherwise we'll get started just so we can get out of here close to on time. How many Vim users in here that want to admit it? Okay. Emacs users? I have to check for spies. I had to make sure that I don't get reported to the Emacs police. Okay, anyway, tonight we are talking about Vim for Perl development. A few points. I do kind of jump around a little more than most of my talks in this one. It's definitely more broad than deep because I'm covering a lot of different things, different techniques. And I'm not going to delve into Vim syntax and stuff like that. You can refer to the docs if you've got specific questions on, exactly what that syntax means. Just because we don't have time, and this is more to be an introductory to several different concepts or things that tools within Vim you can use to make yourself more productive and program faster. Not going to cover basic Vim, but it looked like most of the hands that went up, people have used it, so that would bore you anyways. I'll just cover a few for those who have not used Vim before, but may occasionally need to log into a server and know how to at least make a change to a file. So I'm going to cover that much so that at least you know how to do that. I'm also trying to cover things that you're not going to find in the standard documentation. Because again, you can do that yourself. This is also the first experiment in a related technology talk. You remember last meeting we had 2 months ago, I said I was going to start opening it up to not just Perl stuff, but related technologies as they relate to Perl. That way that gives us a lot more topics to pick from, a lot more presentations that can be done. So this is just kind of an experiment. We'll see how you guys like this and get some feedback. These slides were created entirely in Vim. So, all right, Vim is a modal editor, which basically means it's got several different modes. If you're used to like TextPad, it has one mode. You type junk in it. It's got command mode, which basically interprets keystrokes as commands rather than as text that you're typing in. It's got insert mode, where then it's actually interpreting keystrokes as actual text, and it puts it on the screen for you. It's got a visual mode. Actually, it's got more than one visual mode, depending on how you want to slice it. There are different ways you can either select by character, by rows, or by blocks. There's several different ways you can select text. And it's also got beep mode, which actually VI has had that, which is when all of a sudden you're hitting keys and it won't do anything but beep at you. And so when that happens, hit escape. Now, usually that just means you've hit some key and didn't realize what you hit and you're off in some mode. Just hit escape. It's backwards compatible with VI, which has been around forever. It's also pretty ubiquitous. You'll find it on pretty much any Unix-like machine, where you may or may not find Emacs, although I don't know if that's as true as it used to be. I know at one point it used to be a big deal because Emacs was so huge compared to VI that, a lot of times you'd find VI there, but Emacs you had to fight the sysadmin to get it. Probably not as true as it used to be. So, actually, I kind of already covered all that from memory. All right. This is the survival guide. Basically, you've got H, J, K, and L to navigate, or the arrow keys, as you prefer. Basically, they do the same thing. The reason why they picked H, J, K, and L is because they're in the home row if you know how to touch type. So you don't have to leave the home row to move around on the screen. But you know, if you're not a touch typist, or you prefer the arrow keys, they do the same thing. So you've got if you hit slash or question mark in command mode, it's going to search either forward, slash will search forward, so you hit slash and then whatever you want to look for, and then hit enter. Or a question mark will search backwards through the file for whatever it is you typed in and look for. And then you can continue if you want as a shorthand. Once you've typed in the slash and then foobar, then you can just hit slash enter. It'll just go to the next one. You don't have to retype foobar. Yeah, again, you can. There's lots of ways of doing it. You can also hit N. Escape to get back out of insert mode into command mode. I to get into insert mode. I probably should have swapped those two bullet points, but those two will get you back and forth. There are lots of other ways of doing it. I'm not going to cover them all. Control V gives you by character visual mode selection, and Shift V, or just capital V, gives you by line, so you can select multiple lines to copy and paste or move around or whatever you want to do with it. This is really where you want to go if you want to, this is a good place to start anyways if you want to learn Vim. If you type :help tutorial, anytime you hit colon, it takes you down to the bottom line, and I'll show you guys this later when I actually get into some Vim sessions. You type in all kinds of different commands, and one of them is help blank, and whatever you type in there for blank, it's going to give you help on if it's got help for it. The tutorial gives you a whole tutorial which will give you all the basics of how to go through and how to edit a file. So that's why I'm not doing that, because that's basically redundant. When in doubt, hit escape. If you get into something weird, and you don't know where you're at, hit escape. That'll get you back into command mode. Then you can, go back into insert mode or something if you get into some kind of weird mode and you're not sure what you're doing. :W to save. And you can also put a space and a file name after that if you want to call it something different, if it's a new file or if it's an existing file but you want to rename it to something else. :Q to quit, or you can do it all in one. Do a :WQ, or Shift ZZ will save and quit. So any questions there? I'm guessing most of you probably not. Most of you going, this is really boring. But anyways, this is pretty much the basics to get you in to be able to open a file, make a change to it, save it. So that's about it. All right, here are just a bunch of time savers that I use. If you basically, you've got what's called a vimrc file or a gvimrc file, a G being the graphical version of Vim, because you've got either a console version or a graphical version. You can use both or either, install them separately, that sort of thing. If you set this up to be Perl Dock, and obviously you're escaping this space, that's what the backslash is for, -F. Perl Dock -F, if you're not familiar, is looking for a function name to come after that, and it will just give you the documentation for that Perl function. So basically, when you hit K when the cursor is on a word, it will actually bring up whatever that is. And I'll actually let's see. So if I hit Shift K and then hit enter, there you go. There's the documentation to sort. So that way you don't have to go and look it up elsewhere. You can just hit Shift K right on the word or right on the command if you don't have the syntax quite right, and you can look it up there. So all right. Okay. Yes.
You're just saying keyword PRG equals is that where do we say it's Shift K?
That's Shift K maps to this right here. So whatever you set this to be, you can set this to be any command you want. Right. But since we're talking about Perl,
you're saying, I think his question is that
yeah, this part of it is built into Vim. This part of it is I selected.
Okay. So Shift K always just executes.
Execute what? Yeah, exactly. Whatever that. Good question. Thank you. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Yes. There you go. I figured somebody would know. Because I've been doing this for so long, I don't remember what the default is. So another command is you can map keys to do other commands. So basically you hit a key and it does something. So I'm mapping in mine F2 to :v explore, and then the CR is carriage return. So what the v Explorer does is it opens another window which basically gives you a directory listing. So you can use it as a file explorer, basically. Within, it'll open split your window down the middle, give you something on the left. And if there are any of these in particular, I'm probably not going to show every single one because we'll be here all night. But if there are any in particular that somebody wants to see, I'll demo those. But, and like for this one, if you sometimes like line numbers and sometimes don't, which that's kind of how I am. I don't like to always have them there. Some people do. But so basically I've mapped F5 to set number, and then you see the exclamation point. That means it toggles whichever mode you're in. So if you've got numbers and you hit F5, they go away. If you don't have them, you hit F5, they show up. So not all commands have a toggle, but a lot of them do. And you can look up in the documentation and tell you which ones do and which ones don't. Like another one that I have that I left out was set spell, which actually will give you spell checking in like your comments and things like that, which is really handy. I like that one a lot because that way you can, even if you don't know how to spell word, you can just hit hash and then type the word and then, you know, get the spell checking from there. You get in the GVim, anyways, the graphical one, which is the one I prefer to use, you'll even get the little red squigglies under it if it's not in its dictionary. So, any questions so far? Yes, sir. Again. Because basically that escape guarantees that you're back in command mode. Okay. After it executes all of that, it makes sure you're in command mode at the end. But that's, again, good question. All right. Indenting multiple lines. Basically, if you do a Control V and then down arrow, you remember I said Control V was by character. It will select down a row vertically. And if you hit where N is any number, it will indent that many levels. So if you've got like your tab stop set at 2, and then you set this at 2, it'll indent 4. Or if your tab stop is set at 4, it'll indent 8. So it basically goes by levels, not by actual spaces. So it depends on what your tab configuration is, or your space configuration, or however you've got that configured. But that's really nice, if you decide like, oh, I need to throw an eval around, this block of things. So you can put your eval in, close it, and then just select all the stuff in between that and tell it to indent it one level. So also, you can do, it's great for commenting out a whole block of stuff, because you just do the same Control V thing again, go all the way down, and then you hit capital I, which that puts you in insert mode, but it's insert mode at the beginning of the line. And then you hit, the comment, Perl's comment character. I'm going to have to log in again. Yeah, I'm being too long-winded, apparently. So, and then basically hit escape, and boom, you'll have that whole block of code commented out. Then if you want to uncomment that out, X is the delete command. So then you just select all those hashes, hit X, and boom, now they're all uncommented. So any questions there so far? Does that make sense? All right. Actually, let me open another one here. Let's see, that's not the one I want. I'll demo a few things that I was talking about there. Okay. So like if I say I've got some kind of error, let's say in subroutine tidy, and for the time being I just want to comment it out. So I hit Control V, arrow down, hit Shift I, whoops, as long as I didn't mess anything up. There you go. Whole block commented out. Same thing, Control V, arrow down, X. I'll show you the in Control V, and then the right angle bracket. See how that just shifted everything over? So basically, whatever you select, it'll shift it over. I've got my tab stop set at 2, so it put over 2 spaces.
Isn't that controlled by shift? But usually people set them the same.
Yeah, exactly. You may very well be correct. I don't remember exactly which one it controls it, but yeah. So yeah, that I'm not real clear on which one it is exactly. But basically, depending on how you have it configured, you'll figure out pretty quickly if you have it wrong. Yes, that you can use. So
did that indent it by 2 spaces or a tab, or does that depend on how you have it set up?
it depends on how you have it set up. Currently in mine, it's spaces. But if I did it here, it would be tabs, because that's the way I've got it configured here at work. And actually, I've actually got F12 mapped so that it switches between spaces and tabs. That way, when I'm working from home on work stuff, I can just hit it, and boom, now I'm in work mode. I just happen to prefer spaces, because that's what I've used for years, and that's what I'm used to. And I'll just undo that. We'll leave that file open for now. And let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep, that was everything there. Okay. Now we'll talk about templates, which are another way of making your life easier. And I will make that bigger so everyone can see. Basically, if you set up in a certain spot with Vim, an empty file with the extension name .template. That will be the default template. If you're opening a new file, if you type in vim space foo.pl, this is what you'd get if this is how you've got your template set up. So for .pl files, this is what I get as my template. If you wanted to, you could have a big old block header of comments, that sort of thing. I'll show you.
Where does the template file go?
The template file, I will show you right here. There's a couple of different places you can put it. There's a global place, system-wide, and then in your home directory. That's where I've got these currently. Oops. Oh well, I'll just go back to it. Okay, so same thing with HTML. If you just wanted a bare bones HTML, although I should probably have a document declaration at the top, but I was in a hurry. So anyways, you get the idea. For any different type of file type, as long as it's got an extension, when you type that in and the name of that file doesn't exist, it'll give you what's in the template to start with. Obviously, if the file exists, it will give you the contents of the file, but because otherwise that would just be weird. So I'm going to have to, all right. And whoops, basically this is the command that you would put in your vimrc file that makes this magic work. So actually, if you wanted to, you could put these anywhere you wanted. It just so happens that's where I decided I wanted to put them. So I've got this in my vimrc file, which, by the way, I'll show you at the end. So you'll see a lot of this stuff together in context. It might make a lot more sense when you see it all together. But again, this is some syntax that I'm not going to explain. So if you want to know how this works, you can look that up. But basically, just what it's saying is, if it can't find a file by the name that you typed in, pull up the template contents instead. Okay. Doing all right on time. Okay. Completion. A lot of you, I'm sure, have used a lot of different editors that have some kind of completion, variable name completion or function name completion, that sort of thing. Visual Studio, a lot of different things do that sort of thing. And Vim's no different. It's got actually several different ways. There's actually an Omni completion that I'm not even covering here because that's a little more advanced. So I'm just covering the basic. In insert mode, if you've typed a few characters and you hit Control N, it's going to try to complete whatever you typed by searching forward through the file. But it will also, if you have multiple tabs open, it will search through those tabs. And also, if you've got C tags, which we'll talk about in a minute, if you've got tags set up, it'll search through tags for completion as well. So you can get a whole lot of completion based on just using this. Control P. So N is next, P is previous. That's how you remember it. Does the same thing. It just searches backwards through the file first, and it'll give you a little drop-down list. This I will show you in a second as soon as I explain the C tags. Basically, there's a program called Exuberant C tags. There are more than one tags program out here, but this seems to be the one that's most commonly used. Generates a tag file, which I will show you here. I'm going to go to the end of it because it's most of the stuff that's interesting is at the end. Is that big enough for everyone? So you can see things like Subprocess. What this does, it allows you to hit certain keys, and I'll go back and show you what the keys are, while you're editing and find out where something is defined. So if you've got a method defined in, a .pm file off somewhere else in your directory tree, if you generate this file, it will take you right to where it's defined. So that way you can go to where it's defined, you can look at what it does, and you can go back to where you were. So I'll show you that. The keys for that in a second.
Tab, or is it like?
There are a couple of different ways of doing it. Actually, you can open it in a new tag. You can also, by default, it opens in the same window. And actually, I think, if I remember right, that's a very good question. Now I wish I'd put that on this slide. I think if you hit Control, what is it? You know what? I can't remember. I'll try, if you ask me, I'll post it to the list, how to have it open in another window or another tab. But this one, by default, opens it in the same window that you're in. So if you hit Control right square bracket, it attempts to jump to the definition, wherever that's at. And Control T, once you're there, will take you back. But it's also a stack, so you can go through and jump. Once you get to that function definition, you may go through there and find another one and go, okay, I want to see what that does. But it treats it like a stack, so that basically however many levels deep you go down, you hit Control T and it keeps taking you back. The one thing that I would caution, though, if you are opening it in the same window, is you do lose like your history and stuff like that. So, make sure you don't want to undo things when you get back, because you won't be able to. Because I really wish it would do that. I wish it would save all your context of every file you go through, but it doesn't do that. So by the time you get back to your original file, you've lost things like your undo history and stuff like that. But it's still pretty useful.
I guess one way you could just open another Vim window, go do that, and then go back to your other code.
So let's see. Let's see. Oh, darn it. I need a blank line here. This is hard to edit behind me.
See what you're doing?
Yeah. Okay, so I just typed IN just at random. I didn't know what it would pick up, but it's picking up things like inherit from heavy.pm. It's got all kinds of different things here. So obviously the more you type, the less junk is going to show up here. So because the more certain it is of what it is you're looking for. So if I'm looking for, let's see if I wanted to, looks like IN was not a great thing to use. Let me do S. Sessions. And obviously, what's nice is it shows you too which file it's coming from. Strict. Oh, there we go, start tag. That was one of them. So if I hit enter on that, then it'll replace that with start tag, which this is actually out of my tags file. This is actually exists in one of my modules. So anyway, but we'll undo that for now. Anybody have any questions about that? So Control N goes next, looks forward, Control P goes back, and it searches through several different things. So, and the more you type, the more accurate it's going to be. The less you type, the more junk you're going to have to filter through. Okay. See how I'm doing on time. Okay. All right. Basically, a lot of VIMs come with basically Perl compiled, embedded in Vim, or I don't know if it's dynamically linked or exactly how it works, but somehow basically Vim is linked to Perl. So basically you've got the Perl Do command, which again, you remember the colon, I said you can put all kinds of different commands, and I can go back and show you that. You do %, which means every line in the file, and then you say Perl Do, because that means you want to do a Perl command, and then afterwards you just put in some kind of a Perl command. Here I'm using substitution because that's one thing I don't like about Vim, is that its substitution syntax is not identical to Perl's, so it always screws me up, and I search for things and I try to do search and replaces and I can't find them or whatever. Doesn't always give me trouble, but sometimes depending on how complex the search is I'm trying to do, it'll screw me up. So then I'll just do a Perl Do instead and use Perl syntax, which I'm more familiar with. Yes.
Can you basically use that as like a looping operator?
Yeah, basically whatever you put here, it will, so if you've got the % there, it'll do it on every line, whatever this command is.
Okay.
It's going to act like a filter.
I guess, like, when you're looping through an array, and if you don't, or you do a for each loop, you have $_ underscore becomes.
That's yes, that's what happens here is $ underscore, yes, exactly. So if you put a range, you can put like line numbers here, you could put 1, 10, and that would go through lines 1 through 10, and it'll only restrict to that. Or you can hit Shift V and actually select the range that you want it to do things on, and it'll put some funky syntax there for you. So you hit colon, select it, and then I don't remember, something with angle brackets. It puts some syntax in there. I've never bothered to look up how it works. All I know is it does. And then you would put Perl Do, and it would only execute that within those lines that you selected, which is really nice. Because, oh yeah, another thing I probably should have put in there, but I ran out of room on that one slide, is if you don't know, the % key allows you to bounce between like braces, like start and end braces. So a lot of times I use that, Shift V, then hit %, and that will go to the bottom of the function that I have, or the block, if it's like an eval or something else, or a for each loop. And then that way, I don't even visually have to look for where it ends. I just ask the editor, and it will select from beginning to end the entire thing. So I do that a lot of times, like if I'm going to move it where it is in the file. I'll select it, hit D for delete, go to where I want, hit P for paste. There you go. You just moved your whole function from one place to another in just a few keystrokes. There's also another way you can use embedded Perl, and that is within the vimrc file. So this is an example of basically very basic session management. This is stuff that I actually wrote. There are a lot fancier modules out there you can install for Vim for session management. Personally, I just felt like they were overkill for what I needed. I wanted something just really basic, and so I ended up just writing it myself. So this calls on Vim enter, which means when Vim starts up, it'll call this. On Vim leave, in other words, when Vim shuts down, it will call save session. So basically it'll load the session when you start Vim, save the session when you exit Vim. So basically what I've done here, I'm not going to go through it line by line, but basically what I do is I figured I never go into a directory and just type vim. Some people do, some people may, so this probably wouldn't work well for you if you do that. But usually it's always with the file name. So I figured that's wasted for me. That ability is wasted. So I use that for my sessioning. If I go into a directory and just type well, in my case, I actually have an alias to VI. So I type VI, enter. It will remember my last saved session. So however many tabs I have opened, exactly where the cursor was placed in each file, everything. It remembers everything about my old session, which is really great, like when you lose the network or something like that. Then you could just go back and, yeah, exactly. That never happens. So you can go back in, and I do an MD5 hash of the directory, and that's how it knows. It saves the session and uses that as the file name. So all I got to do is navigate to that directory, hit VI, boom. If I had 10 tabs open, it'll open all 10 tabs exactly the way it was before. Again, works for me, may not work for everybody. It's just happened to be something that was simple enough for what I want. I also have in my drop-down menu, I've got you may have seen it, it's got a session, it's got save and delete, I think, in there. So that's how I can create a session is, I can do a VI -P and then, open all the files I want, and then I'll open each file in a separate tab. And then once I've got that, I just go to my menu, hit save session, and then from then on out, I'm good. I can just, if I lose everything, if the power goes out, I can get my session back the way it was. So what I mainly wanted to illustrate is this part right here, this Perl, you'll see it's basically aping Perl syntax here, but it's actually Vim syntax. But basically what it's saying is anything between here and here is Perl. Send it off to Perl, have Perl do whatever it wants to do with it, and come back. And there's actually an API into Vim, so you can do a lot of Vim commands, so you can mess with a lot of the, like the buffers and things like that in Vim if you wanted to. You could write your own, commands in here, map them to a key, and then have a keystroke that, does whatever. And it's basically got its own API, so you can, if you want to get into that, you can do that too. Because personally, I find the scripting language that's built into Vim is really kind of screwy. I don't like it that much. So I'd much rather do it this way and just write it in Perl and do it that way. Any questions about this before I go on?
Is that like it says Vim do command? Is it like a Perl module or something that Vim?
That's basically built into Vim. Right. So that's what it calls. And then there's a whole bunch of those. And again, you can, if you do like, actually, I'll show you, because I keep promising to show you colon command, and then I never do it. So if I hit colon, you see now my cursor's down there. So I can type in all kinds of different commands here. Right now, I'm going to type help Perl. Except, of course, I can't hit the right key. And then you notice that now I've got a split window. Here's my stuff down here. Here's the help window up here. And editing Perl files, you've got all different kinds of things you can do. Compiling with the Perl interface, that's what I was just showing you. If your Vim didn't come pre-compiled with it. But most modern distros tend to come with it compiled in, so you don't have to mess with it. At least Ubuntu does, I know for sure. And last I knew, Fedora did. So I haven't checked recently, but I know it did at one point. So And again, colon Q, you remember that's quit. Since my cursor is in this window, it's just going to quit out of this window. It's going to leave this one alone. So there you go. I'm back where I was before. All right, let's double check. Okay, yep, covered all that. Okay, these are some plugins. This is just very small sampling. There's tons and tons of plugins for all kinds of different things you might want to do. Perl Support is like the big one. I mean, it gives you a drop-down menu, and it gives you skeletons for all, like for each loops and subs and just everything you could think of. Personally, it's a little much for me. It tends to just feel heavy and just give me more than I want. But for a lot of people, it's exactly what they want. So it does things with regular expressions, all kinds of stuff that it does. So actually, I have enough time. So I'll go ahead and I've got this linked actually to the site. So
you just download that separate then and put it in the...
Yep, and it'll tell you on the page. Basically, it's got a whole site of plugins, and you'll get ratings and number of downloads and junk like that, just like you get on a lot of other sites. Plus, it'll tell you exactly how to install it. And this, I apologize, this is probably going to make you want to gouge your eyes out for the color, but anyways. So this is like the menu that you'll get, the root level menu. So you can get profiling and pod and all different kinds of things here. So you'll get headers like this. But what I found too is, I mean, it takes over like your templating, which I have my own templates that I like. So then I have to fight with it, and that's kind of why I don't use it. But a lot of people like it. So basically, it gives you, these are the commands, \SD. If you type that in while you're in command mode, it will give you a do while loop, just as an example. Or you could just select it off the menu, do the same thing for you. So anyways, I'm not going to go through all this. It does a lot of different things. As you can tell, it's Perl Critic, and like I said, profiling. So it's got a lot of different things that it does. And probably don't need either of those anymore either. Okay. Taglist.vim, what that will do is split your window vertically and then give you a list of the subroutines or tags that you've got for the current file you're in. So you can click on those and it'll jump right to that subroutine. And you can toggle that on and off too. You can map that to a key. I think by default it is mapped to a key that you can open it or not open it. I haven't really used that one too much. Zen coding, here's where I'm kind of really going out on a limb, because this is really not Perl related at all. This is HTML related. But I figured that a lot of people who do Perl also do HTML, so I thought I would bring it up. Zen coding, what it does is it gives you a shortcut way, which is very similar to like CSS selectors. It gives you a syntax to allow you to easily generate a lot of HTML with just typing a little bit of commands. And actually, I'll go back to, let's see, I think I've got one of those already ready here. Let's see, tags, PL. No, that's index.pl. Okay, I guess not. So I'll just say So if I wanted to reconstruct more or less that same thing, what I could do is just type in, if I don't screw this up, whoops.
You know you're in insert mode, right?
What?
You know you're in insert mode?
Yep, that's what I want to be in. So, body. Well, thanks for checking. And then let's just say an H1 for good measure. Why not? So if I hit, by default, the key is Control Y. I remapped it to Control Z because Control Z just suspends the program and I don't ever use that. Z for Zen helps me remember what the key is. And it's also a heck of a lot easier to reach than Y. Y is clear across the stinking keyboard. So there you go. So it's just taken that string that I wrote, and you can do, trust me, this is very simple. You can put, asterisk number for like LIs, and, so if you say 4, it'll give you 4 LIs inside of a UL or whatever. And then basically you can go through, it will jump through the different places that you can type other things, and then you can just go in and type them. So I'm not going to go through all the commands and how to do all of that, but anyways, I like this a lot. So it's pretty much kind of a tangent, but I thought, some people might want to try it out. Because HTML, well, and obviously it'll work just as well for like XML too. That stuff's just tedious to type, so who wants to do that? I don't, so let's see. Okay, yeah, that was the last one of those. And last but not least, okay, I'll skip past all of this is the default stuff that just comes with Ubuntu. Then I just got a little customization. You can see I've been messing around with this since 2007. So this basically sets up your plugins by file type, like the Zen coding. What it does, the way the whole plugin system works in Vim is you can set it up so that certain plugins only work when you're editing certain kind of files. So like Zen coding, the way I've got it set up right now on this particular system, only if it has a .html after it will it even work. If it doesn't, and you hit Control Z, it'll minimize your window because you're not, if you're in a Perl file or a PM file or whatever. Like for instance, we use Mason here. If you wanted to associate it with a .mas, you could just do a symbolic link to it in the, I'll show you the config directory for this. And then the plugin will now work in .mas files as well. And pretty much most of the plugins I've seen work that way, that they're dependent on which type of file you're editing.
Can't you set the
So-
file, like set file
You
type
can
located
set file type as well, yes, you can do that as well. The other way is, yes, because actually sometimes I've had to do that with Mason files that we've got that are named .html, and I'll set file type to Mason to get the syntax highlighting correct and that sort of thing. So set number of columns. I'm not going to go through all of this. It'd be a little too boring. But like when you're searching, you can ignore case or not ignore case. What I do here is, this is one of, I think, a relatively new feature, the smart case. What it does is it ignores case when you're searching unless you put a capital letter in there. Then it's case sensitive, which is kind of useful if you think about it, because most of the time, the stuff that you're doing is, all lowercase unless you're doing camel case or something, and then you may want to specifically go to that camel case thing, and that will allow you to do it by putting the capital letter in there. I set a number, an obnoxiously large number of tabs that you are allowed to open. I forget what the default is, but I ran into it one day, so it was too small. So these kind of things just highlight the search as you're searching. It'll highlight it in yellow, the thing that you're searching for. Here's my different indent settings. Here's what we were talking about shift width earlier and tab stop. And like he said earlier, most of the time you set them the same. I don't even remember what happens if you set them differently, but I've never had any reason to do that. It probably does something confusing, but I've never really tried to do it. The set expand tab is what I can hit the tab key and it actually converts them to spaces. What you'll see my F12 thing in here actually turns that off. So there's my K here that we were talking about earlier. So you can see I'm actually using that. That's how that's set. I didn't really talk about folding, but basically you can do folding where it will take like an entire subroutine or a block and it'll put it into one line. I'm sure you've probably seen that in other editors. And then you've got a command that'll expand it again. So it's basically like an accordion. If you've got a whole bunch of code you don't want to look at, like actually I used this in a project I did here that actually was eSupport, where as I was converting functions over, I would fold them up so I knew I didn't have to look at that code anymore because I was done with that. So it was actually kind of useful to say, oh, I'm done with that part. I've converted that over. I don't need to look at it anymore. So let's see here. That's a bunch of stuff for my status line. I'm not going to get into that. This right here gets rid of, you've got a bunch of icons by default, which I like to have a lot of vertical real estate, and I don't like having those icons there, so I get rid of that whole bar. Here you can see this is where I've got my actual sessioning stuff here. I'll skip over that because there's where it deletes the function. Here's the command that does the templating as I showed you before. This one actually I like. This one's a relatively new change. Basically, I've changed tabs. So instead of a control I, you know, if you do a set list, and what set list does for people who don't know, is it allows you to see invisible characters you normally wouldn't see. So you see $signs at the end of your lines for new lines, control I for tabs. But instead of the $I you would normally see for a tab, I get a pipe and a space, which allows you to easily visually line things up. And I've got it mapped to right there, set list, mapped to F7. So if I want to make sure things are lined up, I can just hit F7. I can see all my tabs lined up nicely. So that's kind of nice. I'm going to go back and do the tidy thing because actually I kind of skipped that, but that one's really fun. It's awesome. Yeah, it is. Yes, and that's exactly how I use it. So right here, there's my F12, the set expand tab. You notice the exclamation point. That means it toggles. So I hit F12, I get tabs. I hit F12 again, I get spaces. So I can toggle back and forth because when I'm doing my own stuff at home, I like spaces. When I'm doing work stuff, I need tabs. So that allows me to just toggle back and forth. Let's see. This tags just tells you where the tag files are located at. You can actually have a whole bunch of places that your tag files are located at, depending on how you do your development and how you do your directory structures. You may want to have a whole bunch of these. Actually, with our stuff, I tend to just do the whole tree, put it in my home directory, and I've got the whole thing. So let's see here. Oh, this right here enables spell checking within pod. The reason why they have a variable for that is if you've got a slow machine, it can kind of slow things down as it's figuring out whether or not you're in a pod block and whether or not it should do spell checking within the pod. But all of my machines are fast enough. I've never had a problem, so I turn that on. This actually, deparse command, don't have enough time to go into, but this is pretty cool. If you've actually got a piece of code and you have no freaking clue, some other unnamed person wrote a piece of code and you have no freaking clue what it does, you can actually run Perl deparse on it, and it'll actually restructure it, and you might have a better chance at figuring out what it's actually doing. So I don't actually use that much. I haven't found that much. And here's where you can see where I'm redefining to Control Z. Again, I said the default is Control Y. And this is where I'm setting up my menu junk. So now let me go back to, let's see. I think it was this one. Yeah. Okay. So you notice I came up with the name tidy to remind myself that this is what I was going to use as an example. You can see this is not very nice the way it's written. You know, you've got a parentheses here. This parentheses is over a space for those of you who are not in front of the screen and can't see that. This is actually over a space. If you wanted to line it up vertically, it should be over here. Or the thing with Perl Tidy is too, you can set your own preferences. Like the way we would do things here is I would actually have it configured to move it up to the end of this line. Personally, the way I do stuff at home, I like to have stuff lined up. So this is the way mine is configured at home. The way I've got it configured here is completely different to follow the standards, the code standards here. So what I like to do with Tidy is you can run it against your whole file. Some unnamed person actually did this to me here on what just happened to be the most complex file that we were working on in the project and the one that we touched the most. And because of, you know, version control issues and stuff like that, basically I ended up getting conflicts all the time because the whole file was reformatted with white space. So what I prefer to do is, instead of writing the code poorly the first time and then running it all through at once to have Perl Tidy fix it all at the end, is to have Perl Tidy fix it as I go. So basically what I do is I hit Shift V, and you remember Shift V is the line select rather than character select, which is Control V. So I just come down here, select the lines, and then I hit F8 if I remember right. That's, oh, and actually, I guess I do have it set up to, oh no, I know why. If I did it earlier and don't select that line, it won't move it up. I'm still fighting with my configuration a little bit. But you notice these are all nicely lined up now. This is lined up with the my. You know, at least it's a lot better to look at than what it was before. And that wasn't even a particularly nasty example. I'm sure you've all seen much worse examples. But that's what I like, is map Perl Tidy to a key. So just select the code that you want to tidy, and then boom, do that. Get it nice and clean before you check it in, rather than after you check it in and then have to check in a white space change, you know, with everything changed, especially when you do it to a whole file, which is kind of, you know, because then when you're trying to do a diff on a file, everything's different. So if you do it this way, I think it's a lot better to do it that way. So anyway, that is basically it. So unless there are any other questions, I think I covered most of the interesting stuff in the vimrc file. And if you want, if you guys have really cool things that I didn't talk about or I don't have in my vimrc file, you're welcome to, you know, post them to the list if you find something useful. somebody else might find it useful too. Brian and I swap things all the time.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. Cool things.
If you find some cool new way of doing something in Vim, just
Yeah.
share it with each other. It really can save you a lot of time, especially if you're, sometimes you're just hacking on data files. You've got some data and you need to restructure everything. So, it's like Vim's got macros. You can set up a macro that, you can repeat over and over again. So there are really just a lot of tools that make your life a lot easier, make you more productive, save time, and also can improve your accuracy over trying to fix it by hand where you're liable to screw it up. Yes, Marty.
Are the differences between GVim and Vim major or minor? Or?
No, basically the primary differences are, this is a separate window. This right here, if I type in Vim, this is basically gets you just within this. It's just I like to work with tabs. I like to have my terminal window available to me to do other things in too. So that's why I use GVim, because it opens it in a new window and then I get my terminal back and I can still use it.
Yeah.
But I don't always use it, depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes if I'm working on a remote server or whatever, I'm not using GVim. I'm using Vim, just like that on the command line.
Yeah,
So-
I tend to use Vim this way.
Yes,
and then
he does.
You learn tricks like how to use, instead of having tabs, you just have different buffers. And you can learn tricks like saying go to this buffer, or if you're working on things for a while and you remember the numbers of buffer, to go to the next buffer, just like colon B7, and you'll get into that buffer. And so basically it's like using tabs. It's all just a little bit more, and like he's showing, you can split it.
You can split
Actually,
windows.
sometimes split it
You can do.
ways, which just gets a little more.
So you can split it horizontally and vertically. You can have 3 different files loaded in those buffers if you wanted to. You can
Gets
do
a
all
little
different kinds
cumbersome.
of
It's like
things.
the GUI is definitely better about some things, but when you're used to it one way, and
Yeah.
and I use Control Z all the time to get out of this.
Oh,
So
yeah,
quick
see,
things
so
like
that wouldn't work
can-
for you. Yeah.
For me,
And that's,
I'd like
yeah.
Control Z to just be able to get to the command line. And
Sure.
where it would be.
You can split it in GVim like that as well, right?
yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it works in GVim as well. And actually, it's draggable
It's easier, yeah.
with the mouse. You can resize them.
Even in this mode, you can resize them. Just
Yeah, you just have to remember the,
number
yes.
and then the right angular bracket or something.
Mouse support.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Whoa, whoa, yeah. Radical idea, mouse support.
So you work on this.
Oh. Here's this one bug.
Okay. All right, well, if nobody else has any questions, I guess we're done.
Useful, like the one you showed with the tidy, was doing a syntax check. So you can
Oh,
do
yeah.
a similar thing as the tidy, except for just it runs the syntax. It's actually
Do like a
so-
Perl minus C
yeah,
instead
and
of
you can syntax check that one thing you just wrote. So even though you're hopefully gonna run it,
yeah,
before you even try to run it, you can find out if there's some stupid syntax error.
sure.
That's useful.
Yeah, and trust me, this presentation just barely scratches the surface. There's a whole bunch of other things that I could have talked about that I just didn't because there wasn't enough time. But so I just tried to hit a broad range of things and hit some of the highlights, the stuff that I use most frequently. So anyway.
Good.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I appreciate it.